Hi there, and welcome to our Facebook Live for October. This month, we are joined by Laura from English First. Hi, Laura. How you doing?
Hi.
Laura is joining us all the way from Boston, sunny Boston. And yeah, we're here to just go over the options available with English First. So we've got a couple of questions that we've received over the past couple of weeks from you guys. But if you've got any other questions that you'd like to ask us, just feel free to comment in the comment section below, and we'll be happy to answer them either in the next 20 minutes, half an hour, or if we don't manage to answer them in the video, we'll get back to you in the comments as well. If you're watching the replay as well, we'll make sure to keep on top of all their questions. Okay, so Laura, for those of us that, or for those that don't know, could you tell us a bit about English First?
Yeah, so English First is, believe it or not, a small division of Education First. And Education First has been in business for just a little over 50 years. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary. And then about 20 years ago, we started English First in China, and it has grown quite tremendously. We have schools in over 57 cities across China. And China is really an amazing, it's a quite large country. People ask, okay, well, is it tropical? Is it snowy? Is it four seasons? And short answer is it's all of them. But for our schools in China, we have both schools that serve students 18 and below, and then also schools that serve 18 and above. And we can go into a bit more about those schools later on if anyone would like to know more in-depth information.
Cool, that's great. So, yeah, what sort of opportunities are there in China? So you mentioned there's opportunities to teach 18 and above and 18 below. So what sort of schools are they?
Yeah, so for our schools 18 and below, we refer to those as our kids and teen schools. And the really, I think, pretty cool thing about them is because we're not directly connected to the public school system in China, we don't have to conform to a certain curriculum or a certain style of teaching. And I think one of the most obvious ways that that comes into play, especially for our teachers, is that we don't restrict them to only working with one age group or only teaching one grade. So instead, we actually give them the opportunity to work with the full age range. And the full age range is 3 years of age up to 18, and then everything in between.
Okay.
So there's definitely a lot of variety in your day for sure, which is something that I personally really liked a lot when I was teaching.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, especially for a first-time teacher as well, when you're not really sure sort of what age group or what level you prefer teaching, it's good to have a good variety as well, especially when you're starting teaching.
Yeah, and the other nice thing about it is, there are people who might have been teaching for a long time, but they're only used to teaching one age group. And so a lot of times I get asked the question, well, I have a lot of experience working with first graders, but I don't have a lot of experience working with, say, students that are 14 to 16. That's okay. So it's not like we're going to throw you into the classroom blind and say, okay, good luck, because that's not going to work out for anybody. We actually give you a lot of training before you even enter the classroom.
Right.
But I think one of the most important lessons that I learned as a teacher is there's no such thing as the perfect lesson plan or the perfect teacher. Every time you go into a new class, you spend time with new students, you learn about their learning styles, and sometimes your lesson might go according to plan, sometimes it might not. And it doesn't necessarily matter how much experience you do or don't have with an age group. I think it's just more about your own flexibility.
Great. And for the schools that are for adult learners for 18 and above, what sort of adults sort of would be attending those? Would it be business professionals or adults that are wanting to just practice their conversational English or for travel?
Yeah, so it's actually a really wide demographic. We definitely do get business individuals, doctors, lawyers, government employees, people who want to improve their English for the sake of their jobs. But then you also get students who are just a little bit past the age of 18. Maybe they've just realized that they want to go to university abroad, or maybe they want to go to grad school abroad. And so they're wanting to improve their language skills. But you also get people like stay-at-home housewives. You might get people who are retired and just have a really strong interest in language and wanting to learn new ones. So everyone asks me what's the maximum age for your adult schools, and there is no maximum age. If you want to learn, then by all means, come and join us.
Great. And for teachers that are wanting to look at working with English first, what would the requirements be, for example, for a teaching position in China?
Yeah, so really fun fact about China is that each city has a different set of requirements for what it takes to become a teacher in that city. There are a lot of cities that have similar requirements. So cities such as Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, at the moment they're requiring 120-hour TEFL and preferably some work experience, although they're not necessarily restrictive in what that work experience looks like. So especially for those who maybe they were in a different career, have decided to go after a TEFL certification, and now they want to teach, those are definitely cities you could go and do that in because you can show that you've had some work experience prior. There are a couple cities that do require more specific experience. So there are some cities such as Hangzhou that does require 2 years specifically of ESL teaching experience in addition to a 120-hour TEFL. But the nice thing right now is that those are the minority. I would say the majority of cities are comfortable with 120-hour TEFL, a bachelor's degree, and at least some work experience, at least 6 months or so.
Okay, great. No, so it's perfect for the sort of first-time teacher that's looking to get their sort of
Exactly.
way.
Yes, exactly.
Great. And in terms of the application process, can you take us through sort of from when you apply to sort of when you start teaching? What does that sort of look like?
Sure. So it does end up being about a 3 to 4 month process, I think, from the date of application to the date of starting in China. The first part is actually the shortest. So when you apply to EF, your application will be reviewed by a recruiter, such as myself, and then we will reach out to you for more information and then eventually for an interview as well. And then assuming that the interview is positive and you accept an offer that we make to you, then we go into the visa document collection process. That first process that I just mentioned usually happens within a week. It's very, very quick. It's the visa document collection phase that takes much, much longer. So unfortunately, the first month is usually the most work intensive on the part of the teachers. So that's when you're collecting a lot of different documents, submitting them to EF so that we can translate them into Mandarin and then submit them for your work permit. And then after that, usually first month is what it takes most teachers to take to complete all of those. Then we go into about a 30 to 45 day waiting period while the Chinese government processes through it. So out of those 3 to 4 months, most of it is just kind of waiting for your work permit to be returned to you. And then once you get your work permit, that's when you can apply for your physical work visa with the Chinese consulate in your home country.
All right, great. And in terms of the documentation that you need, is it copies of your TEFL certificate, your bachelor's?
Yep, so that's definitely, the TEFL is very, very important. And the Chinese government requires what's called an authentication process so that they can be sure that your TEFL is real and approved. And it's not necessarily complicated in terms of what the teacher needs to do. It just ends up being a bit of a long processing time. So the basic overview is you'd have to get a copy of your TEFL notarized, then authenticated by your local government, and then authenticated by the Chinese consulate. And like I said, most of the time you're just mailing it out to these different places, waiting for them to process through it and then send it back to you. So there's, again, not that much work that actually needs to be done on the part of the teacher. It's just that they have to wait for it to be returned back to them.
Okay, great. And in terms of when you start teaching in China, what support is English First able to give students?
Yeah.
Give student teachers?
So for the first 2 weeks that you're in China, you'll actually be staying at a hotel that EF sets up and pays for. So you don't have to worry about those first 2 weeks at all. Essentially, what you have to do is get on the plane and arrive in China, and we'll pick you up from the airport as well. So you don't have to worry about getting from the airport to the hotel. But during those first 2 weeks, you're going to go through a number of different trainings. Some of them are what I like to call the life trainings, and some of them are the more specific job trainings. So talking specifically about the life trainings, some of the things you do will be very specific to things like culture shock training. So here are some things to know about your local culture. Here's what they mean. Here's how to deal with it when you run into a situation that you're not really sure how to deal with. And then there are more mundane things like setting up your Chinese bank account and whatnot. Not exactly the most exciting training per se, but necessary for sure. And then probably I think the most interesting training to most people is the housing training. So a really important thing to know about EF is that we're not necessarily putting all teachers in one specific dorm room or one specific apartment block, because especially for these cities like Beijing and Shanghai and Shenzhen that have, let's see, I think about 40 schools in them between our kids and teens schools and our adult schools. If we try and put everyone in the same place, what that would mean is one teacher would have an awesome 5-minute walk to work, and the next teacher would have an hour-and-a-half train ride to work.
Yes.
So to give you more control over your living situation, whether you live with roommates, whether you live alone, whether you live close to your school, if you want to live really far away, we give you the housing training. And so we'll basically educate you about what apartments are like in China, how to find one, and then we introduce you to local housing agents that help you in that search.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, so if you want to live with someone or if you prefer to live by yourself, you've got that option open to you.
Yep, exactly.
Great. And what's teaching English in China like? I mean, you taught yourself in China, didn't you?
I did. So I taught in Shanghai for just a little over a year, and that was my first ESL teaching experience. And I would definitely say that, again, that lesson of accepting that not everything is going to be perfect the first time around really was important for me. But so my experience teaching in China was, the first 2 weeks I did that corporate training with EF, and then the next 2 weeks I did a lot of shadowing at my physical school. And so there was a lot of opportunities to see different teaching styles, to learn about how the school operated, to learn about the different materials that were available to me to help me in my teaching. And then even though you are put in a classroom by yourself, you're not really by yourself. So there's still a lot of observations that go on to give you feedback so that you can improve, as well as just to give you that support as a teacher for your first time. That's not to say that you're micromanaged either. There's not going to be anybody constantly standing outside the door and making sure that you've done this and this and this and this and this. But again, if you want the support and if you want that little extra, hey, I'm finding that maybe my pacing is a little off in my classes. Would you mind just observing and kind of helping to point me out where that's at? So again, as a first-time teacher, as someone who didn't have previous experience teaching ESL, that was really, really helpful for me.
No, definitely. Yeah, that sounds great that you've got that support on hand.
Mm-hmm. And then beyond those first, couple of weeks and into that first month, so I really enjoyed having the full age range. I really liked teaching ages 3 up to 18. And I really appreciate the work-life balance because especially in the US, we have this unfortunate thing where it happens where teachers work 40 hours a week, and then outside of those 40 hours, they're working another 30. So that's definitely not what we refer to as work-life balance, but that's something that you can have with these positions in China. It is important to know that the hours for the position are on the evenings and weekends, so it's a standard 40 hours a week. You still get 2 consecutive days off. They just won't fall on Saturday and Sunday. Believe it or not, though, that's actually a really good thing because especially in a city like Shanghai, which has about 28 million people in it, you don't always want to be off on the same day as those other 28 million people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So being off on the weekends actually on the weekdays gave me the freedom to travel a bit more and not have quite as expensive of prices. I was actually able to get into local parks and movie theaters and restaurants and whatnot. So I myself was a little wary of not having Saturday and Sundays off just because that's been my routine.
Mm.
But once I kind of got the feeling of being in China and got a sense for the culture, it was a really big blessing, I think.
Yeah, so we were just talking about what a typical day teaching in China was like.
Sure. So, I can give you an overview of what my schedule was like just to really ground the conversation.
Okay, yeah.
During Monday through Wednesday, I would go into my school at about 1 p.m. and from about 1 to 4:30 was my admin and planning time. And generally I use that for things like doing progress reports for students, putting together any materials I was going to need for my classes, and then also doing supplemental lesson planning. The reason why I call it supplemental lesson planning is because EF already has a fully developed curriculum, fully developed lesson plans for every single class you could possibly teach. But with that being said, at some point you're going to be going through the lesson plan and you're going to say to yourself, oh, okay, yep, this activity looks great. This one looks okay. Oh, this is a singing activity. My students hate to sing. I'm going to take that out and I'm going to put in either an activity that might use the song for that singing activity as a supplemental material, or you might just take it out altogether. Because the nice thing about EF is that, again, while there is that support, having these fully developed lesson plans, it's not necessarily to say you have to stick to these exactly. There were some teachers who are just amazingly creative. I was constantly impressed by the things they were able to come up with so quickly. And they would just look at what the objective was of that class. So for example, if it was colors, they'd say, okay, great, I'm teaching colors. And then they completely create their own lesson plan. And that was fine because as long as the students are learning whatever the objective vocabulary is or grammar or so on and so forth, that's all that matters. It doesn't necessarily need to be EF's way or your way. It can be a combined way if you'd like.
Great. So you've got sort of a structure there, but you've also got the flexibility as well. So depending on your students, you can be more flexible with what they actually like and how they prefer to learn.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I would use, the admin and planning time. And then starting at just a little after 4:30, I would have 3 one-hour classes in a row. And specifically those classes during the week, Monday through Wednesday, were for ages 3 to 6. So for me, that was a really, really fun time because I found that I personally really connected with that group the most. And then Thursdays and Fridays were my days off. And those were my days off every week. So that's the nice thing is once your days off are established, it's always the same days off every week. It's not like it changes from week to week. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, the schedule changes just a little bit. So with the students being off from school, that gives them a lot more opportunity to take more classes. And I think a really important thing to know about Chinese culture is that they really do value education. And so any opportunity a student has to be in some sort of class, whether it's math, English, science, Chinese, so on and so forth, they're going to be in that class. So on Saturdays and Sundays, my day would start at 9 a.m. And then my day would end at 6:15 p.m. And during the course of those hours, I would have 3 classes, but each class would be 2 hours long. 9 to 6 can sound kind of like a long day, but in the middle of the day from about 11:15 to 1 p.m., I would have a very long break. So I could use that for anything I wanted. I could take a really long lunch if I wanted to. I could run errands. I could go outside. If you live close to the school, you can go home if you'd like. So you're not restricted in what you do during that time. It's your time, your break.
Okay, great. No, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, so not sort of the norm Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, but
Right.
you do have a set weekend on 2 days, and it's the same 2 days throughout the year, or for however long your contract is as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then on Monday through Wednesday, when I wouldn't go into school until 1 p.m., that left me essentially the whole morning to do whatever I wanted to do. I personally really like arts and crafts things, so I took that opportunity to go to the gym, to do pottery classes, to do painting classes. Yeah, all those different things that I normally wouldn't be able to do because during the workday, you're at work normally. Whereas here, I could take all those classes I don't normally have the opportunity to do.
That sounds fantastic. So a really good sort of work-life balance, and you've got a good quality of both.
Yes, and that is really, really important to me. So that's something that definitely drew me to EF.
And when you're teaching in China, have you got a support network? You've obviously got English First, but have you got other teachers to sort of to chat with about teaching, but also when you're not teaching to go out with? Like, is it quite easy to make friends?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think in general, the expat community I found, at least in China, is very, very open to making new connections. But getting back specifically to the teachers, so when you go to your school, you're assigned a mentor teacher. And so that's the person that you know you can always go to with questions. You never have to feel like you're bothering them or anything like that. But in reality, I found essentially all of the teachers in the office kind of be a mentor teacher to me, because even if they were there for maybe 3 months or 3 years or 6 years, all of them had something different to offer. And I think especially the teachers that were there for a shorter period of time, they could say, hey, so here's something that I learned coming in. I want to pass this along to you. So again, everyone kind of is a supportive figure, but I found it really helpful to also have a large teacher office where a lot of people were there at the same time, because again, as a new teacher, I might run into, hey, I'm not really sure, but I seem to be messing up on the timing of my lessons, or I feel like I'm not using as much materials, or I want more variety in the activities that I'm doing. And all you have to do is ask the person next to you, and they're like, oh yeah, I did this activity, and here's the materials that I use, and here's the links to the websites online that I use. And so it's just a really sharing kind of environment. And then I personally made a lot of friends with people that were at my school. But when you start with EF, you come in with an onboarding group. And my onboarding group was, I believe, about 25 people. So they're not necessarily all kids and teens teacher like I was. Some of them are adult teachers. In Shanghai, there's also an online teaching center as well, so some of them went there. But the nice thing about that is that you already are starting to get to know people and make friends essentially from the moment you touch down in China.
Yeah, so from day one, you've already got that sort of network sort of there.
Exactly. And everybody wants to explore the city and do the same thing. So it's like, hey, we're going over here. Come along with us.
Oh, that's great. And in terms of choosing English First as a school, what benefits do you get if you apply for a role with English First?
Good question. So one of the reasons why I specifically chose EF was even just as simply as word of mouth. So there were a couple people that I knew that worked for EF here in Boston. And so, okay, it's a good, reputable company. They have a brick and mortar building. That's important. But I also met someone who had taught for 2 years in Beijing and then moved into a recruiter role like myself. And so being able to hear about her experiences were really helpful. But the things that impressed me the most were about the support. So the fact that when I go over to China, there's already going to be someone to pick me up at the airport. I'm going to stay at a hotel. They're going to give me support for how to open a bank account, how to get to school. They give you, it's kind of basic, but they give you subway training even, which for someone here like myself in Boston, our subway is really non-existent. So, kind of even going through that process. And they also give you even little tips and tricks that at the time seem so small, but then end up being so big. For example, if here is an offline Chinese to English dictionary. Here is a fantastic app that's offline for the subway map. Here is a fantastic app for how to transfer money back home. So like all of these things, when you're hearing about it at the time, you're like, oh, okay, that's nice. But then once you're over there, you're like, oh, this is really important. So they've really thought out about what your life would be like in China and the information that you'll need in order to be successful. So it's not just focused on what you need to be successful as a teacher in China, but also what you need to be successful in your everyday life in China.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so you've got the best of both. So you've got support when it comes to teaching, but you've also got the support there when it comes to doing everyday things.
Yeah, exactly. And now that I've had the experience, maybe I wouldn't be quite as focused on needing that life experience because I've got some experience for, okay, this is how I go to a new country. And even if I'm not 100% fluent in the language, which, by the way, I'm not fluent in Mandarin whatsoever. I don't want to convince anyone that I am, even though my students were convinced that I'm fluent in Mandarin. So how to navigate something where I don't have the language capabilities, but being a first-time teacher, I really needed that help and that support and that guidance. So that's what really drew me to EF.
Great. And for anyone that's looking to sort of apply for a role with EF right now, um, when would they be sort of looking to start a role, or when's the next sort of big intake of teachers?
Yeah, so the nice thing is we actually have intakes every month. And so I would just say if you are looking to arrive in China, say in April of 2018, you're going to want to count back about 4 months and then apply during that time to make sure that there's plenty of time to go through the interview process and then go through the visa document collection phase. But yeah, we don't necessarily start people at only one particular time of the year. Our schools don't run on a semester basis, so we're not constricted to, oh, we only want to start people in September or in January.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you can apply throughout the entire year. There's no sort of cut off or.
Yep, exactly. So you could start when your contract in December, January, February, March, et cetera, et cetera.
Fantastic. Okay, great. And for more information about the roles with English First, we've actually got some links on our website in the recommended job section. So if you like the sounds of the positions that we've been talking about, or just working in China as an English teacher, if you just click the Apply Now button, you'll get forwarded onto a page, an English First page, where you just submit a couple of details, upload your CV, and then someone from English First will get back in touch with you. So as you said, with the application process, the first part is the sort of not the easiest, but it's the quickest. So you should hear back from someone within a couple of days, within a week.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, there's sort of this reputation, at least at the US, that people are afraid that they're going to apply and their application kind of goes into this black hole. That's definitely not happens with EF. So we do review essentially all applications. There are very few restrictions. So if you don't have a bachelor's degree, that's something that unfortunately is an automatic knockout as far as the Chinese government goes, not even as far as EF, but the Chinese government. But we do review all applications, and so we like to try and get back to individuals as quickly as possible. And we have recruiters that are directly in the UK. We have recruiters here in the US, in China. We also have one down in Australia. So it covers a lot of the different time zones.
Okay, great. So yeah, I think that's all the questions that we had today, Laura. But yeah, if you've got any other questions that you'd like to ask us, just comment in the comment section down below, and we'll follow up. And we'll be here for the next hour, but also if you're watching the replay, just comment below and we'll get back to you with an answer, some more information. But yeah, thanks again, Laura, for joining us from Boston. I know it's 10:30 there in the morning, so you've got a full day ahead of you. And it's just 3:30 here now. But yeah, we're here for the next sort of half hour, just to go over any other questions that you've got for us. But yeah, thanks again for joining us, Laura. It's really been great.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Okay, speak to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Cheers now. Bye.